Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, especially warm welcome to you. If you want to know what we're about, we are Britain's largest pro-marriage organisation. We represent individuals and organisations around the UK who support and promote traditional marriage. That is the lifelong exclusive union of one man and one woman. And our supporters come from all backgrounds, from all faiths and none, from all sorts of political backgrounds. And we have different guests coming on our channel all the time. And it's a real delight to welcome somebody very unique and very special today, Calvin Robinson, who many of you may have heard of. First of all, Calvin, would you like to say hello to us?
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for having me on.
It's a privilege to have you. Now, Calvin, for those of you who don't know, used to be a school teacher in computer studies, and he would post a blog about what he saw as the decay in some aspects of the education system. That blog was picked up by various newspapers. He's ended up now writing for various national newspapers. He's a broadcaster. He appears on lots of different TV shows and news programs as a political commentator, and it's a real pleasure to have Calvin with us today. And what I thought we would do, Calvin, is just go through some of the definitions of words that are flying around these days, because I know a lot of people don't really know what's going on. They don't really know what some of the words mean. And I thought you, as a political commentator, may be able to enlighten us. So if that's okay with you, that's where we'll go. First of all, we got this term culture war. People like Professor Carl Trueman, other people writing about the culture war and claiming that traditional marriage, conventional marriage is at the heart of the culture war. Would you like to tell us what maybe culture war is talking about? And do you agree that marriage is at the heart of it?
Yes. So, I mean, people say to use the term culture war, culture wars is hyperbolic, but I don't think it is, because we're really fighting tooth and nail for the survival of our way of life. It is that essential. And it is not just the married family, it's the family structure in general that I think certain elements of the hard left are trying to break down. And the reason for that is because that's the easiest way to take over a society, is to destroy the nuclear family. Once the parent is replaced by the state, you can implement any policy you like. And we see this all the time. We saw this in, for example, Black Lives Matter, when they wanted to destroy the nuclear family. We see it all the time, especially in education, actually, when it comes to sex education, when it comes to trans issues. You know, in Scotland, just across the border, we're seeing that 4-year-olds can define their gender now without parental consent. And this is what it always comes down to. I don't want to use the term neo-Marxist because people can easily shrug it off, but it's a hard left element in our society that call themselves liberal progressives, that think that they could redesign society in a better image. They want to break down what we currently have, and to do that, they focus on the family first and foremost.
So you say hard left, and I take your point there, yet it seems to be the right of the spectrum that's redefined marriage not too long ago and has introduced a lot of the changes that's happening in the schools. Yeah. So how does that make sense?
No, absolutely. You're completely right. It's the horseshoe of politics. So the far left are very, very close to the far right in their authoritarian ways that they want to change and dictate our lives. But the center left and the center right aren't actually that far from each other. And they are very liberal in their social stances, even though they differ economically. So, you know, Labour and Conservatives will usually differ economically, not so much these days. But socially, they tended to be liberal over the last few decades, really. And the Conservative Party is no different there. We've seen, you know, they brought in gay marriage. They've brought in a lot of policies that, in their eyes, promote equality, but from a different perspective, watered down fundamental British values, family values.
And can I cover one thing? We often get labelled, I think, inaccurately and unfairly as homophobic because we support a conventional view, one man, one woman marriage. How would you argue, and how would you say, well, actually, that's not appropriate?
The problem here is the argument around equality. So equality seems to suggest everyone should be the same, and I don't think that's true. I think equality really and truly should mean that everyone has an equal opportunity in life. I don't think it means that every single person needs to be the same. Take man and women, for example. I don't think a man and a woman is exactly the same. There are many things that men can do that women can't do, and vice versa. Men tend to be physically stronger, for example. But what we are in our equality is complementary. So we work together. We were born to live together. That's the whole purpose of having two different genders. And I think that marriage is the combination of that. It is bringing together one man, one woman, not just for procreation, but in order to experience the fullness of love. Men can live together, happily be companions together. Women can live together, be companions together. What they cannot do is start a family and procreate. That's just physically impossible. And that's not homophobic. That's just It's just a fact of life.
That's exactly what we would say. So it's not a question that anybody is worth more intrinsically in societal terms, although the research does indicate that in terms of child outcomes, adult outcomes, actually growing up with your married mum and dad statistically gives much better life chances. But for us, it's like defining salt. Salt is sodium and chlorine, and that's what salt is. And as soon as you start redefining salt to include things that might look a bit like salt, like sugar, for example, you get confusion everywhere. And defining salt as sodium and chlorine isn't phobic towards any chemical or any chemical compound. It's just saying that that thing is that thing and it has its unique purpose. Let's preserve and keep it there because it's useful for society. And that doesn't mean you hate or fear anyone or anything else.
That's a fantastic analogy. I'll use that one.
You're welcome to. Let's move on with our definitions then. We hear this term woke in society. What does woke mean and how does that affect the whole marriage debate?
Well, I'll be charitable because I think to a lot of people, woke means that you are awake to societal injustices. However, to a lot of other people, including myself, woke tends to mean that people are social justice warriors. And there's a difference between being awake to social injustices and being a social justice warrior. A social justice warrior is one of these people I talked about that wants to reshape society in their own image. There's something self-righteous about it. There's something in the attitude that we know better now than we've ever known before. All humans in the past are wrong. Everyone in the past was homophobic, sexist, racist, all the ists and isms, but we are better. We're more liberal, progressive, and therefore we need to change the past and or erase the past and start from year zero, start from now. And not only that, everyone else must take on board our values. Everyone else must acknowledge that there are 99 genders and that white people are inherently racist and black people are inherently oppressed. And all of the social justice causes that they are always well-intentioned, they always come from a good place. Well, usually, I think they're well-intentioned, but the methodology of them is actually quite divisive and very toxic and breaks down our way of life. And they're not always open to the hypocrisy of their ways, unfortunately.
And would I be right in assuming that there's often a shunning of evidence and research and even logic, dare I say?
Yes, because it's blinkered. It's almost a faith at this point.
That leads to my next definition for you to give us, which is this concept of cancel culture and no platforming.
So cancel culture and no platforming is the idea that if you're not in the in club, you are fair game and to be got rid of, to be shunned from society.
What's the worries around free speech for that kind of behavior?
What is the antithesis of free speech? So for me, the idea of free speech is that we should all be able to express our ideas, challenge them, debate them, maybe change our minds sometimes, or maybe bring someone onto our cause. But when you are no platforming and cancelling people, you're saying what you have to say is not even worth listening to. And what that does is that shuts people down, and it actually causes extreme opinions to thrive because they go underground and there's no challenge to them and there's no ridicule to them. So they grow stronger and stronger until they become more prevalent.
And that's part of what we might call critical thinking, which we would say is good. So you analyze what's being said, you analyze who's saying it, you analyze why they might be saying it, you look at the evidence and the data and you come to a conclusion. How does critical thinking differ from something we hear a lot of these days, which is critical theory?
Oh, nice, good question. So critical theory tends to think that there is already a structure in play and we have to follow the rules of that structure in order to make change. So the idea that, for example, traditional racism is prejudice or discrimination against someone based on their color of the skin. But in critical theory, specifically critical race theory, which is a branch of critical theory, racism is a power dynamic between white people and non-white people. Now, you can never not be white. I can never not be non-white. Therefore, we cannot change that argument. We cannot have a debate that would be seen as fair under critical race theory because you have the power dynamic that I do not have. Therefore, you are shut out of the conversation and anything I say is given as fact. Even though I might be wrong, and I very often am. And I think that's a very dangerous situation to be in.
And surely it's the content of your character, not the color of your skin, which we've heard a lot of. Yeah. If any of our listeners want to follow up on this kind of conversation, Helen Pluckrose's book, Cynical Theories, is a very good one that takes this way back into the depths of where it came from and forward into what it might turn into if we're not careful. Moving on, Calvin, to another brief topic, which I know that critical theory touches on, this concept of toxic masculinity. What on earth does that mean? And is there a form of non-toxic masculinity?
Toxic masculinity is another woke idea. These social justice warriors think that to be a man is a bad thing. And I think it's this idea that, all things that men do that are not exclusively male, but tend to be male, predominantly male. Such as chivalry, for example. Opening a door for a lady used to be considered good manners, and now it would be considered a microaggression, which is another word we haven't defined, but this idea that you are somehow committing an offense, and then in this case it would be misogyny against someone covertly. And I think that's a shame, because it's another way that they are breaking down our way of life and breaking down our society. Like I said at the beginning, men tend to be physically stronger. So it's okay for a man to pick up the shopping bags and carry them rather than expecting the woman to do it. These are kindnesses. These are charitable things that we should expect. We should expect a man to stand up on the tube if a woman is standing there and let her take the seat because she's the fairer sex. And that's not sexist. That's not misogynist. That's kind. It's charitable. It's nice. The exact opposite of what's going on the other end of the spectrum, where they're trying to erase what women are and say that anyone can define themselves as a woman. And we're seeing, women are being beaten up in sporting events, mixed martial arts events, and things where men are clearly physically stronger. And because they're defining themselves, these men are defining themselves as women, and people are accepting it because they think it's the progressive thing to do.
And do you think it has an impact on fathers and fatherlessness?
Fatherlessness is the biggest crime going on in our society that no one is talking about. It's a darn shame, because you mentioned that statistics are out there, and they really are. The Centre for Social Justice had a really good report on this, that children's life expectancy, one of the biggest contributors to that, to their grades, to their health, to their happiness, is having a stable family home with a mother and father at home that love and care for them. And we are seeing so often these days that fathers are not at home because they're not expected to be. We don't give them that responsibility anymore. We don't teach it to our young boys that you are going to have to grow up to be a man, because we're not allowed to say man. We're not even allowed to say man up anymore. It's all at this point toxic masculinity, and it's damaging our way of life.
And actually what we need desperately in our society is more masculinity, not toxic, but more masculinity, teaching young boys how to grow up respectfully, where the limits of their strength and behavior are. And hopefully that will affect the criminal justice system, everything in society.
Absolutely. Men are becoming more and more effeminate on the one hand, and not understanding what it means to be a man. But on the other hand, with the epidemic of fatherlessness, we're seeing more young men take to gangs to feel a sense of belonging, and knife crime is soaring in our capital. And a lot of this, I think, can be pinned on fatherlessness. We need men to stand up, take responsibility.
And touching on that issue, going back in time a little bit now, the case is an example of a wider kind of a theory in society. So thinking about Matt Hancock and his little affair that he had, and the way the media picked it up and dealt with it was that, well, actually the affair, the breach of trust and faith to those who trusted him most wasn't the issue. It was the fact that he broke his own 2-meter distance rule, and that's why he had to go. Now, am I alone in thinking, no, actually, if your private life isn't one where those closest to you can trust you, why on earth should us, complete strangers, trust you with our lives?
Absolutely. And I think our leaders, whether they're political or not, should show some moral leadership too. And I was highly disappointed to hear the church. One of the bishops went on national television and said, it's not the adultery that bothers me, it's the hypocrisy of him not following his own rules. I'm like, for goodness sake, if you are not going to pay attention to the immorality of the situation, who is? And we need to really raise these issues and say, look, this is a guy that's left behind his wife, his 2 kids, he's destroyed his own personal family. In what way, shape or form can we trust him to help run the country?
You're doing okay in your career, and you're really contributing in a very valuable way. Yet you've got some quite unique views in terms of what often appears on the media. So I'm just wondering, have you got any advice or hints and tips for other people who may, like you and me, feel the same way as we do about lots of these things, but are just terrified to say anything for fear of losing their jobs, for fear of being vilified on social media? What advice would you give to people?
So I don't think my views are very unique. I don't think I'm particularly good at what I do. I don't think I'm particularly intelligent or unique in any way. I just have common sense values, normal, everyday British values that most people in this country have. The only difference between me and most people is that I stand up on television and radio and say these things. Most other people on television and radio are social justice warriors and or too afraid to voice their own opinion. And they'll ask questions in ways that do not let people know which way they fall off the fence. And I think it's cowardice. I think more people need to stand up and say, look, I believe in this. I believe in British values, and I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed of it. And if we all do that, they can't cancel all of us. We have to say it's not okay to erase our way of life. It's not okay to denigrate the genders or to claim that everyone is racist and sexist. And it's just, we have to stand up for what we believe in. Otherwise, it'll be too late.
My last question for you is, what do we do How do we regain the culture? Where do we go from here?
Tony, you're spot on. We cannot rely on our leaders. So I've been around the block a while now. I know quite a lot of parliamentarians. I've messaged them personally over the last few weeks because I'm so afraid of where our country is going. And every single member of parliament that I spoke to personally said, I know it's bonkers, I disagree. But how many of them stood up in the chamber and said anything? And this is, again, it comes down to cowardice and ambition. And I think it's disgusting. So what we need to do, we can't rely on our political leaders. What we need to do as normal, everyday folk is stick our heads above the parapet. We have to be brave enough to say, I might lose my livelihood. I might lose friends, but it's the good fight. It's the fight for helping maintain our way of life and maintain our culture, our heritage, and civil society. If we don't do it, who will? No one else is going to do it for us. So we have to, even if it's just on social media, put your real photograph, put your real name, put your real bio. Don't be a bot, don't be a troll. Don't swear at people and tear people down. Promote a positive argument that is an alternative to the degeneracy that's going on around us, because people are looking for something else.
We always encourage people to continually write into their MPs, to write to newspapers and to, give their views, but also, dare I say, get 2 or 3 friends and join a political association, whichever party, join in and let your views be known and get involved in choosing the candidates, etc., etc. And so you pick people who are willing to stand for the things that you agree with, and don't leave it to other people, because more often decisions are made by the people that are in the room. And it seems that people that think like you and me are more often not in the room, and maybe we need to be.
That's been our problem, because the woke or the social justice warriors or the hard left, whatever we want to label them, and I don't like using labels, but we have to determine it somehow. These people have been marching. The long march through the institutions is a well-known cliche, but it's true, because they've taken over every public institution, they've taken over every political role, and now they are running the country, but they are in a minority, because most ordinary people in this country do not see the world in that way. And we need to wake up and stand up and take ownership of these roles again.
We'll leave it there. Calvin Robinson, what a privilege. I enjoyed reading your articles. I enjoy listening to you on the TV. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Tony.